Okay.
All right, we're going to start recording just so we can get the conversation going.
I just got to fill my water. We can get going, yeah. We're good to go.
Oh, you're already recording on everything?
Everything's recording, yeah.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Wow.
Yeah, so.
Happy day.
The goal is for you to not even notice when we start recording.
I mean, yeah, that's
just
right.
to be comfortable.
Yeah.
So, but we will start off by saying today we have Nina Lugo on, who thought we'd be here. She is a school social worker and a licensed master social worker working on her C.
I am.
Yeah. All right. So I nailed that.
You did.
Perfect.
Fluidly. That was great. Good for you, honey. Proud
I was
of you.
worried about it.
No, that was great. Good for you.
All right. So I think the best way would just be for me and JP, one, to thank you for taking the time out of
Thanks
your
so
day
much for
to do
being here.
this.
We
Of
appreciate you
course.
so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
This
Now I
is
have a
big
reason to
deal.
use my new light.
I know. It's so exciting.
All we want to talk
And
about.
it makes you look beautiful. That's all
Also,
that
can
matters.
you say on camera how impressed you are by the decor of the apartment?
So I was, because honestly, I was expecting it to be, everyone can understand when I say this, a man's apartment, right? Like maybe some boxers hanging from the light, right?
Yeah, you'd like that, wouldn't you?
instead of having a drying rack. But I was very impressed. We have curtains
Yeah.
and a curtain rod.
You're easy to impress, though. Curtains,
Honestly, little
curtains
things-
impress you?
Little things make me very happy.
Respect, though. Respect. Yeah.
Very little things.
I appreciate the compliment. Thank you.
Oh, anytime.
So do you want to, I think it'd just be nice to start off with like a little bit of background on you. Like,
Yeah.
you want to go into like what you do on a
Sure.
day-to-day basis?
Oh, sure. So I started actually like when I first went away to school, I actually was a travel and tourism management major, which is obviously totally different than what I'm doing now. But I just couldn't get into it. So fast forward, I ended up getting my associates in human services, and then I went to Lehman for my undergrad and my graduate. And then throughout all my education, I always worked in a school.
Okay.
And before then, I always worked with kids. So I started being a mother's helper, if you will, when I was 14. And then I've worked with kids ever since. I've worked in schools now for probably 8 years. I've worked in districts in Westchester. I've worked in districts up here where we live, Dutchess. But so now I am a school social worker, and I primarily work with grades K through 2. But our school is K through 5, but that's because we have actually now I think it's over 800 kids in our building.
That's a lot of kids.
It's a lot of kids.
It's a lot of fucking kids.
So it's a lot.
God bless you.
It's a lot of fucking kids.
The real heroes are here.
Yeah. So, and it also just my day-to-day depends. I could have a whole schedule. I have my mandated counseling load. I have my push-in lessons. And then I can have a kindergartner who's trashing classroom, or I could have a older student, having a real mental crisis, saying that, they're having feelings of hopelessness, despair. They don't want to be here anymore. They want to unalive themselves. And I've had to transport kids, right? So from the school to the hospital, or from the school to an actual psychiatric intake, which can also be super scary, especially for the younger kids. So my day-to-day looks really different. Sometimes it's super quiet, and by sometimes I mean probably less than 5% of the time. Especially now when we come back from break and all the kids are thrown off because they've been off for almost 2 weeks.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah, but I do love it. I mean, it's definitely mentally draining and emotionally when you're dealing with everybody else's problems and then you have to deal with your own. But I do love what I do. I really do. I do love what I do. I just don't like when people ask me what do you do for a living? I'm I'm a school social worker. And they're like, oh. I'm don't feel bad
What do you
for
think
me.
that? What do you think that? Do you think it's people feel bad for you?
I think historically, the perception and the information that was put out to society of social workers, we CPS and we take your kids. This is going to bother me so much, but there's an older movie and they would show it to us in school. And it's basically about exactly what I said. It's a portrayal of this family. The social worker's coming, so I have to we have to have the house clean, this, that, and the third. And they have to hide new things that they bought because then the social worker's gonna be now you have money. And it's no, that's not what we do. And especially nowadays, it actually takes a lot more than I would like to admit to have a child be removed. From
So there's a big spectrum of it, because I didn't even know what a social worker was until 4 or 5 years ago when I started going to therapy.
Yeah, yeah.
And I always just thought that like a psychiatrist was a therapist. So I used to I called my therapist a doctor.
Yeah.
And then she's like I'm a social worker.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. There's that stereotype that now that you mention it is that it's like I think of like Angels in the Outfield.
That's what I was
Yes.
thinking
That was your-
about.
yeah.
Yes.
Right up front.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
And also
Yeah,
great
exactly.
movie.
Yeah,
Great
fantastic movie,
Phenomenal.
classic.
Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
That's come up like 3 or 4 times.
But yeah,
Well,
that's what she said. She's like, you're social workers here.
That
He's
it's like
why?
the person who, it's like
Yeah.
CPS. Yeah, I didn't
Yes.
even know that it was like a clinical term. I thought it was just like somebody who worked with.
So historically, it was never something that was like clinical. Historically, it was people like when basically like the people who who have the means and the people who don't have the means. So like this is like back in the 1800s when like the United States was really trying to become like a country, and basically they would have these people that were just volunteers that were trying to help people who maybe didn't have like less money or who were at that time, they didn't know what to call that, but that were mentally ill. And then it started to become an actual position when child abuse laws came into play. Okay. And that's when it actually became a position and started to be actually, something that was in need.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know that background.
Yeah. No, I mean, obviously I only know that because of school, but it makes sense that, and as it evolved, I think, my hope is that, when people say that to me, I'm like, no, like I chose this life. Like I want to be here.
Yeah.
And I think that also makes all the difference when I'm working with families, when I'm working with kids, when I'm working with even, some of my coworkers who, yes, I'm there for the kids, but they'll come in my office, close their door, they're like, I need to talk to you. I'm like, oh my gosh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, what happened?
So it's like I don't know, the first thing that comes to my mind is like the person who's like, they're like a lawyer. So like immediately like they ask every single question about law to that person. But it's like, no, I'm actually very much more focused into something completely different.
Yes,
like,
yes,
I don't
yes.
just deal,
Right, exactly. And like I think it's important for me to say that like, I am here for the staff too. Because they have their own issues too, right? And if they can't even, come to anybody, where they're building that they are, then I think that's important that I can just be like, hey, like I'm still here. Like, yes, my job is for the kids, but like I'm here to support you too. And I've had those interactions with staff. Like I've helped staff find hospice resources, addiction resources, for spouses or friends, immigration services, things like that. Okay. But that's part of my job, right? Connecting community organizations to families, to individuals, so they can get those resources and supports.
Damn, you just put social work into such like a bigger.
I was just gonna say. The next thing I was gonna say was
understand.
Yeah.
I was gonna say like, can you describe it in one sentence? But I think you just did that.
Yeah, and that's what it is. It's like I feel like at a school I get to do a little bit of like the macro, the meso, and then obviously like the individual, which is the micro, which is with the kids.
When you say meso, what do you mean?
So meso is in terms of like social work. I mean, communities, community-based organizations, which we like to call CBOs. So like if I was working for example, if I was working for CPS, that would be considered like meso because I'm working with bigger organizations. I'm helping them collaborate, things like that. And then micro is obviously like more of like individualized. And then the macro is like laws, HR, policies, things like that.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Is there a particular part of it that like brings you the most joy or that you get the most meaning or purpose out of versus other? Because you describe it's a very broad job.
It is.
And there's some parts that are very hard, but is there a certain part of it that you really...
Yeah. I think it's when... especially like when I've had to have hard conversations, either with kids or either with parents or even admin or teachers, when even if it's not what they want to hear, that the kids will be like, they'll still come back and be like, I love you, Miss Lugo. Like, like, can I come see you today? And like, meanwhile, I had to have a very hard conversation with them before. And something that my kids know is that I don't keep promises unless I know I can keep them. And I don't lie. And I tell them that because I think it's important that you have those open communications with kids. Kids are a lot smarter than we think. And they know when you're not being real with them. And they pick it up like this. And then, again, the whole part of me having those relationships is to build that rapport and to build that trust. So they know, I said, listen, I'm going to tell you something. You're not going to like it, but I'm not going to lie to you. And I'm very straightforward with them, and they know that, and I think they appreciate it because they know I'm like, listen, you're not in trouble, but I still have to call home because I have to let them know what's going on. And they're like, okay. So I'm like, I will let you know everything that happens. And I do that. I'll call home and I'll be like, hey, I will let you know, but whoever you live with, what they said, because it also, there's the anxiety part, right? Which, and then I also have to then fix that.
That's the big word. That's the big word. You hit one.
It just,
ding, ding.
It's a spiral, but I do love it. And I think just to, to get back to your point, I think it's when the kids like really just continue to want to come to you and seek help, even when you do have to have those hard conversations with them, or really like, build that trust, because they know that like, yes, like even though I messed up, I know Miss Lugo like still going to be there for me, and I know I can still go to her.
Yeah, that's super important, especially for kids nowadays.
Yeah, and it's just sad. I feel like the way kids are growing up today.
It's very under. I think on like what I'm seeing underneath the surface is that you're kind of teaching them that to move forward, you have to have tough conversations.
Yeah,
and as somebody who, as a kid, didn't have somebody being like, you have to have these tough conversations in order to get through it.
Right.
In a way that's great, because it's just like, I remember thinking as a kid that having a tough conversation was going to end the relationship.
Right.
And that it was going to, you were mad at me if you had to have a tough conversation. And it seems like you're kind of like flipping that on its head.
Yeah. And I think, it's okay to have those conversations with kids. You just have to make it appropriate for them, right? Use the language that they understand. And that's with anything like, death, addiction, and I've had, kids who unfortunately, when we did have to call CPS, they were removed. And then we had to have that conversation. What does CPS look like? Are they bad people? Because we get the families who tell them the bad people are coming. If you tell them what's truly going on, they're going to take you away from us. And then I have to tell the kids, no, like, that's not how it works. Like, that's not how this works. Like, it's okay. Like, no one's going to take you away from mommy and daddy. But if and when
sometimes they are.
Sometimes they do.
And,
no.
And then
that's
I don't mean to make a joke at it, but yeah.
No, but and that's when you have to have
that's where the honesty and the trust comes in,
Yeah, because then I'm like, well, do you understand why? And then sometimes the conversation of addiction happens when the kids are like, mommy's always sick. I'm like, well, and this is what it looks like. And it can get really sad. And I take home a lot of what's going on. And I learned in the beginning, my first year actually at this district that I'm currently at, I learned to not bring it home. And if my fiance asked me like, hey, how's work? I'm like, it was okay.
Yeah.
It was okay.
Good to have those boundaries.
Yeah.
Is there a specific technique or kind of like, do you like kind of process it on your way home? What's your, like, how did you learn to do? Because I think people who don't have nearly as stressful a job as you struggle with that. So as someone who has a super stressful job, how do you deal with that?
I think with any job, I think you always have to know that like you can't fix everything. And when your time is up to leave at your job, it's okay to go home. And it's okay to know that like I did my best. I'm going to have stuff that I'm to do tomorrow or the next day or for the next month. But for today, the day is over, and now I need to go home and take care of me. So I have about a 25-minute ride home. So I try to, be with my own thoughts and kind of like, process myself. And then when I get home, if I feel like I do want to share something just because it's like really eating me, I'll say like, work was okay. I was like, but I just need like a few minutes, but I really do want to talk to you about something that happened today. And after, again, like I said, working in the district for that first year, I learned that works best for me. And also it just leads us to a healthier conversation between my fiance and I, because I'm not getting so upset. I'm not coming in, word vomiting really about my whole day.
Yeah, because that can be a lot for somebody else to process too, because like you're working very close with the trauma, but like they don't have a relationship to it other than like how it affects you. Right. So then it affects them.
Exactly. And I don't want to do that because I'm already getting that vicarious trauma, right? Speaking to somebody else. I don't want to then dump that onto somebody else when my whole job is to be able to handle that, figure out how it's best I can support them, and then also take care of myself. So, which can be a lot.
Yeah.
So let's just backtrack just a second. Like, so what got you said you were going to school for something completely different and change your major. What was it that made you change into this? When did you realize that you had a passion for service in that way?
Yeah. So I was attending SUNY Delhi. So that used to be like majority of like a tech school. And honestly, to be quite honest with you, I wasn't even planning to go to college. I had plans to be a Marine. They were coming to my house. They were coming over for dinner. That's just what it was. Like, that's what I wanted to do. And
it was really CPS in disguise, though.
Yeah, basically. I was like, I want to do something that's like really cool. So when it happened, my mom really wanted me to just, can you apply to one college? Like, just let's just see. Fast forward, I go to Delhi. I don't like travel and tourism management. It's not what I want to do. And also, I'm really bad at math. So those accounting classes were really hard. So I came home and I wasn't working for about a year because I was really trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I ended up working in a school district in Peekskill, and I ended up being a teacher aide there. And I loved it. I was like, but I don't want to be a teacher.
Yeah.
And I love teachers. They don't get the respect that they deserve. But every year there is more and more mounted upon them that they need to implement in that 6-hour day with 500 topics. And on top of like testing and all of that, I was like, I want to work with kids, but I don't want to work with them in that capacity. And my mom just happens to be a retired school social worker, but I never thought that's where I would go.
Damn, you got in the family business.
Yeah, and it was so weird because everybody's like, oh, like your mom had you. I was like, no, honestly, like I came with this up on my own. And first I thought I wanted to do school counseling, but the difference is that if you get a degree in social work, there's more options for you to work in other places, where if I were just to get a degree in school counseling, I could only work at a school.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I'll get a degree in social work and then, I'll see where it goes. And I ended up, honestly, like I said, just loving it. And when I finished my master's and my undergrad, they were both during COVID. So my last few weeks of my graduate school were online, and then I still bought a cap and gown, and I literally just saw my name scroll across the TV, and we went to the Cold Spring Riverfront and took pictures, and that was my graduation.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of people got robbed of that.
Yeah, it was really upsetting.
Yeah, but I think that this field, like knowing you now, suits your personality much better than being an accountant.
Yes, most definitely. And honestly, I never knew really what it took to be like a social worker just in general. And now looking back, I definitely should have just started there from the beginning, because I would have loved to explore other areas of social work that could have utilized, some like those mental health skills. But I still love where I am right now. So.
It's always a journey to kind of figure that out. You never know. If you had started in it, maybe you wouldn't be in it now.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So are schools the only places that you've ever worked at?
No. So I also worked, I used to be a job employment specialist.
Okay.
So I used to work at a youth bureau. And at the youth bureau, we would help kids who were not in high school anymore from the ages of 16 to 24. I might be mistaken, 24, 21. And basically they would come in, we would help them either get their, their high school diploma, like their GED. We would help them find a job. And how we would do that is we would often ask a lot of the CBOs, so the community-based organizations, hey, like we are able to pay them ourselves. It's almost like an internship for them. Would you just be able to kind of like take them on and show them what they're doing? So we would help them that way, or we'd actually help them get a real job. So we had a few kids go into the Metro North, which was really cool. And we were also able to supply them with travel. So like train tickets, bus tickets, things like that. And then before, I was doing mostly just like the childcare stuff. So I was like going to school, working during like wedding catering, and then babysitting. And I feel like a lot of my just like innate like instincts working with kids come from just babysitting so often, and just knowing how you need to approach somebody, even talking to the parents, like being able to explain to them like, your child did something really messed up today. How do I explain that to you in a polite term or polite way without basically saying that your kid just really did something horrible and it's not a reflection on you, but I still need to let you know.
Yeah.
Like, how do you word that?
How do you find most people take that? Because I know just thinking about somebody telling me that right now, like because of the way like I was raised and like the shit that I'm trying to work on, like I know my instant reaction would be like, "The fuck are you?"
Yeah, no, and it's hard because it's some aspects like I understand when parents say those things, right? Like if someone hits you, you hit them back, you know, and I understand that because that's the kind of the way we were brought up, right? Like you don't let anybody punk you, like like they hit you, you better go back over there and show them what you did.
Don't worry, toxic masculinity was on your sheet. We'll get there.
But you know, and unfortunately, you know, I have to tell parents like, listen, I understand you, and if that's what you want to teach your child, like that's fine. I can't tell you in that aspect what to do, but please know that there's consequences that are going to happen, regardless if they're at school. Or if they're out in society, it's still going to be a consequence. And actually today, I actually had to make an interesting phone call. And when you have to repeat what children said or what they searched, and it's very inappropriate, and then you have to say that verbatim over the phone.
Yeah.
It's...
My mom got a few of those calls.
Yeah. I had to just make one today, and I literally had to say, like, please no, these are not my words. Like, I'm sorry, but I'm just going to read to you, quote, end quote. And sometimes they're like, they did what? And I'm like, like, it's okay. Calm down. But it's also funny when parents, like, I am going to be 33. I have no children. But I've worked with children for a long time, right? But it's almost interesting when parents ask me, they're like, well, what do I do? I'm like, you're asking the childless woman what to do. But it's interesting because a lot of times if you look at it, the kids most of their lives are spent at school, more so than home.
Especially nowadays,
With
With like the 2-income household and everything.
Yes, and I feel bad, especially for those kids who have to go to morning care. Then they go to school, and then they go to aftercare too. It's a long day for them.
Do you notice a difference in kids who, and like, there's no way of knowing like all of them, but do you notice kind of a difference in the kids whose parents are pretty present in their lives versus the ones who really aren't around at all?
Most definitely. And it's disheartening when you know this kid can be great, right? Even if they're just succeeding in small increments, and the guardians or the families don't want to have that same message be consistent at home. So you're having a child be very conflicted with, do I listen to, you know, home, mommy, daddy, grandma, grandpa, whoever, or do I listen to the people who can get me in trouble, or I can get my recess taken away, I can be suspended. And that's when it becomes hard, and we try to really bridge that gap, especially now. I think schools are really trying to be more proactive than reactive because of everything that's going on. But sometimes we don't get that, and then it's really just us with the kid, and they know when their parents aren't. They're like, my parents not gonna come. Or when they're like, I'm gonna call mommy, and they're like, so and I'm like,
that's tough to see.
There's no leverage. There's no leverage because they know that their parents are gonna be like, so
as a kid who was like afraid of getting like the principal or the teacher calling home, I hated it, and I wish I had one of the kids. Well, I wish I was one of the kids who had a parent who didn't give a fuck when I was a kid, and now like you look back on it and you're like, wow, I'm so lucky that like, because who knows? Because like you think about it now, and it's like it's so sad that if you did something messed up at school and then you try to call home and the kid's like, and what they're not gonna, they don't care.
Yes, and then when we even try to have a conversation with parents, you know, and then it can become just really unproductive when they're yelling or saying that, you know, like, you don't know what you're talking about, not my kid. And I think that's why I really try to step lightly, because especially if I don't have a rapport with that family and I'm getting asked to call about an incident with a child, I oftentimes will say no, because I oftentimes put that on like the teacher, because especially if this is the first time they're hearing it and they're hearing it from me, they're like, 1, who are you? 2, why is the teacher not calling me? And then it's almost like, what happened? Why are they getting in trouble? So every time I literally call a parent, I'm like, hi,
this is social worker.
Yep. I'm like, hi, this is Miss Lugo, school social worker. I was like, everything's fine. Nobody's in trouble. Because the first thing they say is, what happened? Is everything okay?
Mm-hmm.
But when the teacher calls, they're like, oh, hi, you know, like, and it's more of a candid conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I always say, like, listen, I was like, if I have a rapport with them, I don't have a problem. But I do want to empower you as a teacher to say, it's okay to call home and say, your child has not been doing what they need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And explain that to the parent and say, this is what might happen if this continues. And if the parent, you know, is pushing back, you're allowed as a teacher to say, you know, this is what needs to be done. And I feel like, especially now, there's a little more, parents are very more influential in the school. Whereas before, you know, teachers would call home or, you know, things would be said and it was taken just like that. But now we have parents coming in and be like, well, why? Well, what did that other kid get? Why is my kid not getting that? And
do you think there's a reason behind that as to why that's changed?
I think it's the parenting.
Do you think do you think it's parents are more defensive about the way they raise kids, or
yes,
that generation just above us
yes,
of raising kids? Like, I could never raise my kids the way my brother raises his kids. I'll say it right now.
It's
him and his wife, not for me.
It's I don't like it. There's such a disconnect. Like, you can tell with parents who are one, either younger or older, and also one, if they're involved or not, and also if this is their first child. I feel like that.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
that's a really good. That's a very good point.
All accumulates. Wow. You know, like you know, kindergarten. Sometimes we have kindergartners. This is their first school experience. For the first 2 weeks, we are ripping kids off their parents, right? And for some parents, they can't handle that, and they'll leave with the kid. And they'll leave because they can't handle their kid screaming and crying like that, and they're like, "Forget it, I'll just take them home." And we're like, "But a little anxiety and a little fear is healthy." Those two feelings are very healthy.
Damn, I wish you were my social worker. if you had told me that anxiety was healthy as a kid,
yes,
I don't know where I'd be right now.
There's a difference between built-in anxiety, right? But then anxiety that is making sure your ass is getting up in the morning, getting to work on time, making sure my homework is done, because I need to know that if I don't do my homework, then a consequence is going to happen, and then I'm going to be ruminating about that. So that's what I consider healthy fear, healthy anxiety.
How do you approach that with people? Explaining that to them, like giving the parents that advice, like when their kids are having those feelings?
I think it's hard because I try not to use too much terminology, because then I think parents start to spiral. And they're like, what do you mean my kid has anxiety?
Especially those two words,
like
right off
that
the
generation,
bat,
like even just mentioning it around my parents.
Yeah.
Is
like,
like,
what do you mean?
Yeah, I think that there's a very big misconception of like anxiety being directly related to suicide or like severe mental illness.
Yes, exactly.
And maybe that's a product of like the definition kind of broadening. But
yeah. And I also think it's just, you know, obviously like up until even like 10 years ago, mental illness was a stigma, a huge stigma. Like you wouldn't tell anybody that you were diagnosed with anything. And if you were considered, you know, and I hate saying this word, but you were crazy, you were psycho. And now when I explain it to kids, I don't like using the word weird. I don't like using the word crazy. I said, there is no normal. Define normal. There's no such thing. And I said, just because someone does something different than you doesn't make them weird and doesn't make them crazy. So when I explain to them, they're like, well, I have anxiety and I can't. I'm like, okay. I said, well, explain to me. What do you have anxiety about? And a lot of it is somatic, right? Especially for the younger kids. I have a bellyache. I have a headache. I want to go home. You know, I have to go to the bathroom. Things like that.
For people who don't know what that means, can you explain what somatic means? Yeah,
so somatic is physical reactions to an emotion, and it's mostly considered with younger kids. But even now, so like you had your test today, right? You had your real estate test. And I know when I took my licensing test, I was so anxious, so nervous that my stomach was in knots.
Yeah.
Because it was just so bad. But like when people don't always understand that, like, oh, my stomach hurts. And it's like, the kids don't understand that either. It's like your stomach hurts because you're nervous.
See, that's like, so this is the first time in my life that I've noticed that because like, as I've done the work on myself and like read and learned about these things and like how trauma manifests in your body and stuff, I do a lot better of taking like roll call before like I do stuff like that. Like, am I actually anxious or
like you're grounding yourself.
Is this resistance because like I'm about to do something that's pretty big and like that's exciting, but like the rejection is always scary.
Right.
So like you go and like that's kind of what I did today. Like my drive today to take my test was total relaxation compared to last Tuesday when I went to take my final.
Right.
The drive there, I was like, I'm nervous, and I had to the whole time I had to be like, this is just the feeling of anxiety, and you're okay. You're not gonna die. Like you're gonna take this test, and you're gonna do fine because you've been studying.
And you know what? Even if you didn't, it's okay.
Yeah.
Because like it is what it is. But I think that's what's hard to explain to the kids. Like they're like, no, my stomach hurts. I'm like, no, I know, but your stomach hurts because of X, Y, and Z. But they don't have the language yet. They don't understand. So putting it to them in a term or like explaining it to them and where they can understand it. And then also giving them tools that's actually going to work for them. And I always tell families that when I'm working with their children, I say, especially when they have goals of, they'll identify coping skills, they'll utilize those, independently when feeling negative expressions or negative emotions. And what I tell parents is that goal for them is self-led. I can give them every coping skill in the book and teach them how to do it. But if it doesn't work for them, that was a pointless lesson. So when they do have that goal, one session will work on this, one session will work on a different coping skill. And then at the end of that month, I say, which ones did you like best? And they tell me. And that's from 5-year-olds too, because I can say, take 3 deep breaths. They're like, I don't want to take a deep breath. I want to go punch something. I want to go throw the chair and I want to scream. And I'm like, okay, we can do that, but you can't do that in here. You have to find a safe place to do that. And they know that in my office, I don't care. That beanbag doesn't have any feelings. You can punch it. But if you come to hurt Miss Lugo, then that's when it's like, okay, well, now you're hurting me. I have feelings and I'm trying to help you. But they usually know that if they're coming to my office, they know that they're not in trouble. I don't get paid enough to do discipline. I just have the conversation with them like, this is a warning. I want to make sure you're safe and making good choices. If you do it again, I can't help you. So that's literally what it comes down to.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important to not only like explain it to kids, but to give them tools that they can use even when they're alone or if their parents aren't really involved or they're in class and they, maybe their teacher isn't super attentive or whatever it is, to have something that is like, because I as a kid who had very complicated emotions, like thinking back, I'm like, nobody ever told me like how to deal with my anger or anything like that.
No, and I'm sure.
Yeah, and especially in a healthy way.
Yeah, and I'm sure you were ostracized because of that. And, like there wasn't resources for that. Like I remember being in elementary school and I remember a child that had now I could say like severe anger issues, and it would scare us. We were in like 4th grade, but we'd be flipping tables, throwing chairs and screaming, and they would just always remove him. And like, no one ever talked to us about it as a class to say like, hey, like sometimes, our friends have really big feelings. That was not okay, but please understand that he's not in an okay space.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And that when he comes back, we're going to treat him as he's still part of this classroom. He's still part of our family, but he is learning. And we have those conversations with the kids. Like if something scary like that happens in the classroom, I will go into the classroom and say, does anybody have any questions? Like, do you want to know what happened? Yeah. Like, what are your thoughts? What are you guys feeling? Because you can't just brush over that.
Yeah, that's super important. We definitely didn't have that.
No, like even just like hearing you talk about it, it's like, damn, like where was that?
I know, and it's so sad because we were basically all the same age. Like we didn't have that.
No.
Like no one was coming. We had Dare.
No.
Yeah.
But, like,
didn't work.
Didn't work.
No, not at all.
Which I will say they do still have.
In
they
fact,
do still do
in
Dare.
fact, it was quite the opposite. I think it made me want to do drugs more.
I made me more curious. But
Don't find that war, man.
So in talking about that, is there anything that you notice with, like, especially like we can probably relate to it a little bit more because we grew up as young boys.
Yeah.
And nobody kind of explained to you dealing with like that anger and things like that. What do you notice about kids today in terms of, do you feel like it's getting any better, especially for boys? Because like, I feel like in terms of like guys these days, like, do they understand that it's okay to like Because like as a kid, I never was told like it's okay to cry. Like if I was told it was okay to cry, maybe my temper wouldn't have gotten so out of hand or something like that. Like, how do you explain to them when they're watching on TV, they're watching Vin Diesel being a manly man, and that like guys don't, whatever. That's a silly example. How do you kind of relate that like, no, like your emotions are on a spectrum, and like girls aren't the only ones who cry, and like how do you explain to girls that like men aren't the only one who get angry?
Right. And we do have those conversations. We start those conversations in kindergarten once they come in. You know, I will do, we call them push-in lessons. So I do social emotional lessons within the classrooms based on a various topic. And I come in and I will ask them, and it's interesting because as they get older, they've learned the answer, but I'll ask the kindergartners, I'm like, is it okay to be angry? They're like, no.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I'm like, is it okay to cry? They're like, no. And I'm like, did you know it's actually okay to be both?
Yeah.
And they're like, look at me like I'm crazy. And I'm like, you are allowed to feel whatever you want. If you want to have 3 feelings at once, I don't care. You're allowed to.
Can you tell my dog that's okay to be anxious?
Okay, Savannah has anxiety too.
She is. I try to
Just
tell.
need coping skills, mommy.
I try to tell her, but she don't listen.
You shut up, Dad.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
It's okay. You're not anxious anymore. But I tell them, and they're like, well, what do you mean? I said, you're allowed to feel whatever you want.
Yeah.
When it makes it not okay is your actions, what you do when you're feeling that way. So I said, if you're angry and you want to cry, or if you're angry, you can go up and tell a teacher and say, I'm angry, or you know me, or you made me angry. I said, you are allowed to tell an adult that. I said, even if it's your teacher, I said, there's a way to go about it. So, are you kidding? That's gonna kill you. And what I tell them, I said, you know, I see that you're angry.
Yeah.
Throwing chairs is not okay. Running out of the room and eloping, that's what we call when they leave the classroom, is not okay. If you want to come to my room and you want to scream your head off, and I have like a dinosaur like punching, remember when we had like the clown ones?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a dinosaur one.
The thing that like flops up and down. Yeah.
I said, you are only allowed to do that stuff in Miss Lugo's office.
I think that's why I hate clowns, though. I'm scared of them.
They're terrifying. I don't care
Because
what anybody says. They're terrifying. But I think it's important to normalize that if you want to cry, I don't care, cry.
Yeah.
I said, and I sometimes explain to them, I said, you know.
Do you ever tell them, like, sometimes Miss Lugo cries, too?
I tell them all the time.
Right.
I said, also, I said, adults make mistakes all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I said, and I will be the adult. And I said, Miss Lugo, if she's wrong, I will apologize. Because I think it's also important that kids know that, like, adults can also be sorry, too. Like, we don't always know the answer.
Yeah.
We might be wrong. And that's also a reason why I don't promise them anything unless I know I can do it.
Mm-hmm. I think that's so important, like you mentioned earlier, about how, like, kids are a lot smarter than we think.
Yeah.
And I think that when I was a kid, too, it was, and I'm not even saying, like, my parents or any specific teachers, but it's like, no, like, this is meant for you as a kid. This is what you're allowed to do. And then, like, no, then the adults do this. And I'm not talking about watching an R-rated movie.
No, yeah.
I'm talking about, like, no. Like, this is how adults deal with it. This is how you deal with it. And I feel like it makes them feel like they're different or that they're not people or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah. And that's what I tell the kids. I said, you know, because, like you were saying, like, your parents were involved, so you were nervous to go home and you got those calls, right? And I have to normalize that for them. I said, mommy and daddies and grandmas and grandpas and whoever you live, they're allowed to have those emotions too. I said, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that they love you any less. I said, but they're expressing that to you so you can understand that what you're doing is not okay, it's not safe, and it's not acceptable.
God damn, I wish somebody told my parents to tell me that.
Yeah.
Fuck, we're having a whole different conversation right now.
Exactly.
It's that simple. But when, I think it's also, especially now, like JP, you were saying, like, I've seen a dramatic change in children since I started working in school.
That was a big question I wanted to ask you, yeah.
Dramatic change. And I wish, no, let me not say that. I will say there is some for the good. But a lot of it of what I'm seeing is they just have no, like, basic skills. No basic skills.
Oh, yeah. Have you noticed that when you go out in, like, public to a store now and they have younger kids working, like, they're just like, God, they seem happier when they don't have to have an interaction with people.
Yes. And that's also another thing is that the responsibility and accountability aspect, right? I think a lot of times parents or caregivers or even teachers, you know, they want to have these expectations. They want to have these, you know, this is what you need to do, but then are afraid because they don't know how the child's going to act. And if they do have that huge meltdown, it's now what do I do? And how do I calm them down? And then you're trying to calm yourself down while this child is screaming at a level 10, throwing crayons. You know, I've gotten rocks thrown at my head by a kindergartner. So like you have to be just able to meet them where they are. And I think that's the most important thing. Like if I'm going into a crisis and a kid is throwing things, I'm not going to go walk up to him. That's the stupidest thing you can do. The kid is clearly in fight or flight. Why are you going to go walk up to him as a taller adult and be like, what's wrong? No, I'm going to...
Well, sometimes you're taller.
So true! Oh my God, it's so sad. Everyone's taller than me. No. It's actually really, really sad. Funny you say that.
Yeah.
One of the lunch and recess aides thought I was one of the kids the other day.
Oh, no. Do you want to talk about that?
I do.
It's okay to cry about it.
All of a sudden, I'm like,
You're giving us all these insights.
I'm just in the cafeteria and I'm on my phone. The kids aren't allowed to have phones at all.
Oh, okay, that's good.
Yeah. So when I see this like lunch and recess aide coming up to me, and she looked at me, I was like, yes. And she was like, oh my God, I thought you were one of the kids. And I was like, with my phone out. Yeah. And I was like, I have a badge on. And she was like, I know, but she was like, I just looked so fast. And like one of the kids was standing next to you, which was your height. And I was like, oh, damn. Thank you so much. I work here though.
Damn, I didn't know I was triggering you like that.
Oh my God, it was horrible. It was
what was the question?
It was the meanest thing they ever said to me. I'm so sorry, I digress.
No. Speak your truth. Speak your truth.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be very different. And I think you guys, I mean, I just think us as like this cohort of kids who grew up like in elementary school and it was very different. I feel like I would have liked that now for these kids, but now with the resources that we have for them, if that makes sense. Like I would love them to still have the rolling cart with the TV and the VCR and like, yes, it's a movie day. Or like, you know, we're still going and doing those really cool field trips and actually learning something that is like rewardable and like that makes sense as to why we're going there, not that we're just going to the apple orchard down the street, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But it's hard. And I think everyone's just trying to keep up with everything's changing. Like even the testing where these kids have to be for reading. They're making kindergartners that I have to do sentences. Half these kids don't even want to write their names. And you want them to write 3 sentences?
Yeah. Is there anything you notice, I'm sure you get this question fairly often, that like what's kind of changed about the way kids are and the way that they interact with you especially since the pandemic?
So what I've noticed is that there is no, like I was telling Steve, just like there's no basic skills. There's just like
the eye contact is huge. Like you mentioned that the eye contact is big, man. Huge. So like when I go to like the store and a 17-year-old kid looks me in the eye, I'm like, "What's up, buddy?"
Yeah.
Like,
"Hey, nice to see you."
Yeah, exactly. I got rear-ended by a 17-year-old kid a couple weeks ago, and like no damage happened or anything like that. But the kid was so respectful and like so nice.
Yes.
I was like, I kind of forgot what happened.
Yes.
I kind of was just like, I'm just so glad that this kid's parents taught him how to be respectful.
You're not thinking that that's how they're going to come out and respond to you. And we have some of those kids, I'm like, please never change.
And because I know that if it was me at 17, like I probably couldn't take full responsibility for it.
No.
I'd probably be blaming everybody but taking the responsibility on myself.
Right, exactly. And I think that if we had those resources now, but without all the technology, I think it would definitely, I think we'd be like in that perfect like middle space of like helping our younger generation bridge that gap from COVID, but also social and emotionally too, right? Like I understand the push for academics with math and reading. I get that. I understand that our country as a whole, we're not really good with that right now.
What are we, 192nd in the world?
It's horrendous. Like it's really bad. Like we have a lot of kids, even in high school, that are on like a 5th grade reading level, 6th grade reading level.
Jesus. Yeah.
And it's sad.
It's probably not their fault.
Right, and it isn't. It isn't. One, because we just don't have the resources, right? And they're not getting it. But also, I would hope, like, you can read, you can do your taxes, right? You can add the check when you go out to dinner, but are you a good person? Are you kind? Are you respectable? Are you loyal? Are you an active contributing member to society? Like, that's what I want to know. Not if you know what 42 times 5 is.
Yeah.
That's. I think that you make a good point. Like, I feel like there should just be like, I don't even like. I feel like there should be like a homeroom for everybody should be like being a good person.
Yeah. Yes.
Because I and especially like you and I grew up together. Like it was not considered cool to be nice to people.
No.
Yeah,
No.
It was not.
It wasn't.
That's why I'm like this.
Yeah. You're so right. 'Cause I
Yeah.
remember that too.
Yeah.
And now it's very much we are, you know, we expect that of the kids. Like you need to be kind.
Yeah.
And we do approach them very much like, I want you to look at your friend. They are crying. What did you say to them? And we make them be very accountable. Like you need to say, I won't make them say sorry because I don't like when people just say sorry and then they don't know what it's for or if they can continue to do it. So
it loses its meaning.
Exactly. Yeah. And I say that to them. I said, if you're going to say sorry, you need to say for what? Because you could just say sorry and they're not understanding. Or I have the kids who are getting apologized to because they'll just say, it's okay. But you can see that like it's not okay. I'm like, you know, you don't have to say that, right? I'm like, you can say thank you for apologizing.
Yeah. I appreciate your apology.
I
feel like I didn't learn that.
apology.
I feel like I didn't learn that till I was like 28 years old.
Which is crazy.
That you don't. That it's not your job to make them feel like what they did was okay.
No,
you can
that's
accept
up to
their,
them.
But you can
Right.
accept their apology.
Exactly. But I think it's hard for them because they think they're being mean.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, you're not being mean. I was like, they need to understand that you're also allowed to tell your friends, I don't want to talk to you right now. I need a break.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it's a little bit different now. Like we're making these kids be more independent to having these social conflict skills because they have none.
Yeah.
They're constantly coming down to us, constantly going to their parents or constantly going to a teacher like, so-and-so did this, so-and-so said that, this is happening, this is happening. Well, what did you say? What did you do? Nothing.
Yeah.
So you just allow this person to berate you, to be unkind to you, to possibly physically hurt you, and you did nothing? But,
Yeah.
and it's just like,
Well, yeah, I feel like there's kind of like two different sides of it, which is like the one side is the kids who are, I won't take shit even if it's just like a normal thing and you're not getting bullied or anything like that, but like, no, nobody's gonna punk me.
right.
And then there's the other end of it, which is like, I'm gonna accept everything that happens to me, and when you're a kid, whatever happens to you, you feel like you deserve.
Right. And especially if you don't have the language or the tools to like
Yeah.
even say, I don't like that, please stop.
Yeah.
They don't know what to do. And that's really what I feel like my job is like you having them understand the vocabulary and the verbiage and the tools to navigate these social situations because they're not going to go away. If anything, they're just going to get bigger and they might get worse. And we've had like, you know, and I talked to the other school social workers and I'm like, how's it going up there? And they're like, we're dying. And I was like, yep, sounds about right.
Yeah, like the other day, I have a couple friends who have really young kids, and he's got a 3-year-old, and he's a little maniac, and he said that they were doing, it was like a school play or an assembly or something like that, and he like tried to kiss one of the girls, and the girl turned around and smacked him in the face, and there was like this whole thing in the school that was like, who's right or wrong, and it's just like, well.
There is no right or wrong.
Yeah, and also, but like maybe both of them didn't handle the situation correctly because they're fucking 3. you know what I mean? It doesn't. We don't have to put blame on anybody when they're 3 years old.
It's about the lesson. Like, why did this happen?
Exactly.
Why did you feel like you had to do that?
Yeah.
And I think that's also like what we talk about, especially when it comes to discipline. You need to take into account their age.
Yeah.
Even their social ability to understand and their processing, right? So like if you tell them like, why'd you hit her? Like, I didn't hit her. Because to them, that could be real.
Yeah.
To them, that could be very real. That is their reality. I didn't hit her.
It wasn't hard. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I didn't
what
hit
do
him
you mean?
hard. They should see what happens when I really
she
hit
didn't
him.
cry.
Yeah.
Like, no, I understand that. But like you putting your hands on other people is not acceptable. But I think that's also hard for parents too. They're like, well, my kid got hurt. Or my kid is the one who keeps getting in trouble. What do I do? And a lot of the times it is developmental, right? Like it could be developmentally appropriate. Like that is developmentally appropriate. And when I say
of course.
appropriate,
I mean, if they were 12, it'd be a way different
right?
story.
And like when I say appropriate, like I don't mean like it's appropriate for them to hit them. I mean
No.
at their age, the way that they deal
It's
with conflict,
understandable.
yes,
Like
it's appropriate for their age.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of times when I call parents, you know, if there's a situation or anything like that, and I say, socially appropriate or like developmentally appropriate, they're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, your child's in 3rd grade. Yes, they Googled the word penis. They're starting to become curious. Like, it's developmentally appropriate. Like, should they be doing on a school computer? No.
Yeah.
But did we have the conversation? And I think you should have a conversation because they're clearly becoming curious. But they just get very, I think, like you said, I think parents are becoming very more defensive.
Yeah.
And very much, well, what are you doing to the other person? Or what are you guys doing to stop this?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, we need you to be on our team. It can't just be us.
I feel like there's like a big gap in like how parenting from when we were raised to like how parenting is now. I feel like so many people are just like, I'm not raising my kids the way my parents did.
Yeah.
And they do everything the complete opposite, thinking it's better when it's not.
It's not.
But no, and like your parents will be like, you're doing it all wrong.
Yep.
But like nobody finds the common ground on like what actually works and like the things that work the best. And like I feel like not enough people are taught like the stuff that a social worker like yourself can actually lend to people, like the coping mechanisms, just like things to like work on yourself so you can be a better human, so you can human better.
Well, right. And that's the thing, right? Like, you are responsible for this child for the rest of your life. You are making a huge imprint on these kids, whether you are in their life for a day or 3 years or a month. Like, something major could happen in that one day and they're going to remember it for the rest of their lives because it was just either so traumatic or just so important to them. And whether it's positive or negative, like, that's a really big thing and just shapes us as people, right? Like, as we grow, and which also can contribute to our anxieties, right? You know, our mental illnesses in the future.
Attachment styles.
Oh, big one is
big word. Oh,
that's a big one. And it's sad to see, but when you talk to someone and you talk about like their past, you're like, that's where it started. And it's like almost kind of like sad because I really try my best not to read people. I really try because it's not healthy for me, number one. But I think when I'm talking to people, it's hard for me not to, especially strangers, when they're like telling me their stories. And I'm like, and they're like, what? I'm like, no, nothing. I'm just listening. I was like, I'm just listening.
Yeah, it's only a matter of time.
intently.
Like,
Yeah, but
exactly.
it's hard because then you, being in this position, like, you want to elicit advice, right? Or help support. But sometimes it's also okay just to listen.
Okay.
Like, just because someone's coming to me doesn't mean that they're asking for advice. Sometimes they just want to come to word vomit or share, and then they feel better, and then they're fine.
Sometimes the best advice is just like listening to what they have to say, because a lot of times you've probably had it happen to yourself where like you're thinking something through, and then if you just talk it out, you kind of find the answer on your own. So sometimes it's better to just let somebody like work through something and just be there to support them.
And I think something that I've learned, especially just doing even like therapy, but also just like conversations with friendships and significant others, is silence can be uncomfortable, but it can also open doors to greater conversations. And sometimes the kids come in and I say, you know, they won't talk. And I said, that's okay. You don't have to. I was like, we can sit here and be quiet. If you want to just sit here, and then when you're ready to go, you can go. It doesn't matter to Miss Lugo. When you're ready to talk, you can talk. But sometimes, especially with younger kids, they start to feel that anxiety, like, why is it so quiet? And then they want to start talking. But I think sometimes having that silence, especially with an adult and having that conversation, it allows for people to process what you're saying, but then also gives them a minute to respond in the way that you would hope is what you're trying to have them understand. But again, you can't predict how someone's going to act in any sort of conversation.
Yeah, like that. Like, even just especially like you talk about how like you're having to call a parent for the first time or something like that. Like the anxiety that comes with that, just like thinking about you having to do that. So like, oh God, like I don't know, like this parent could be a fucking maniac, or this person could be, you know, the nicest person in the world. I'm curious to ask you, because I grew up very religious, and like you mentioned something about kind of like dealing with and explaining to parents about things that are like inappropriate, like especially like sexually, things like that. How do you kind of navigate the spectrum of how differently parents look at stuff like that? Because like as somebody who like I'll say it flat out, like I grew up thinking that like sex was like this shameful thing.
Yeah.
And then like I'm sure that there are plenty of parents out there who also look at it in a very healthy way and try to like approach it with their kids.
Right.
How do you kind of navigate that and approach that?
So I'm just trying to like find something.
What do you got?
I think for me, so I'll start it this way. If I know a parent is, pardon my language, like batshit crazy, every time I call them, I will make sure that I preface the conversation with either, hey, I had a conversation with so-and-so, like I just want to like update you and let you know what happened. Or if it was something like a little more serious, I will say, do you have a few moments of your time I want to talk to you about a situation that occurred? Okay. And it's a very big difference in my tone and then what I'm trying to relay to them. But sometimes
it's hard for adults to talk about it. So like how do you
it is.
How do you explain that, like, you know,
especially when I have to like repeat verbatim sometimes and what, even if it doesn't have to do with like a penis or something like boobies or something. But sometimes it's me having to say like, hey, like your child has shared with me that they don't want to live anymore, or sometimes they wake up and they wish that they didn't, and then it's having those hard conversations, and then the parents are like, you know, either they don't know what to do, they're asking for resources or asking what they did wrong, you know, why didn't I see this? But the whole reason why they're coming to you and asking for that is because you're supposed to be, I learned this word, the solid, right? So especially with kids.
Okay, I like that.
So if there's a crisis and there's like 5 adults, like, you know, coming to the crisis, and the child is already gravitating towards one adult, that's the solid. Let them be. Don't interrupt them. They're already making the connection with the kid. They're starting to settle them. So that's what I have to be for the parents when I'm having those hard conversations. I have to be the solid. I can't get all worked up. I can't show like my animation. I have to say, you know, this is what we can do. What do you need? And how can I support you going further? But then I get on the other hand, the parents who are, that's not my kid. You know, you guys don't know what you're talking about. You know, you guys are racist.
Yep.
And it's hard when you truly are trying to do what's best for the kids, and the parents just want nothing to do with it. And
well, they want to deny it. It seems like it kind of seems like you get a lot of denial of.
Yes, but then it also comes to the part where it has to do with mental health, or it has to do with academics, and then it comes to the point where, like, well, do I have to call CPS because now it's a negligence case? And that's that fine line of, we are here to support you, but what happens when you don't follow through as a result of your child's wellness or academic well-being?
So it's a lot. That's a lot every day. Yeah. So I feel like that's a good time to ask, since we've heard quite a bit about your day-to-day. So what do you do to maintain? Like, because that is such a lot to take in, dealing with other people's trauma,
it sounds
and
exhausting.
your own reactions to it.
It's definitely very exhausting. I actually just recently, I mean, I definitely always had anxiety, but I was recently like officially diagnosed probably like 2 years ago. And so I started taking medication for that. So I take that every day. And it's definitely helped. Like, I can tell the difference, especially when I'm just at work. I'm not almost like so like ADHD, right? Like, okay, I have to do this, I have to do this. I'm like, okay, focus on this, triage, what's most important, what can wait. And then I think also being able to go home and not repeat my day. Because there's some days where I am physically restraining kids and I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted. My body aches. Like, I'm mentally exhausted, and I don't want to talk to anybody. Like, I don't want to do anything. And I think now my friends and my fiance understand, like, if I'm kind of quiet, or like if I just want to go in the other room, it's not because I'm mad at you or something's wrong. It's just I need to decompress by myself and try to figure out, one, how I'm going to handle this, right? And then 2, what am I going to do for that family, right? And that's always what I'm thinking of. But I think for me is, I love being outside. Being outside is like my favorite thing, except when it's 14 degrees outside.
Yeah, we were going to do this outside.
And then I just think having a really core group of my people, right? Like my tribe, who that is. And I think I've really, as I've gotten older, like learned to lean on my family. And where I was younger, it was like, you know, your family, like, it's weird. Like, you're not cool. Like, you're not supposed to be home.
I totally grew up that
like,
way too. Yeah.
You know, like
Yep.
you don't hang out with your mom. Like, that's weird. But
Yeah.
now I'm like,
Yeah.
Dad, can I come over? Like,
Yeah.
and
Same.
I just want to hang. Like, I don't want to do anything. Like, you know, and I think that also is as we get older, right? Like, you know, let's go out to the bar. Let's go get fucked up. Like, let's go do this. Go spend money. And now I'm just like, I want to sit at home, with a good book, a crime doc.
Yeah. Solid.
And just relax.
Yeah.
But I think it's definitely taken me a while to figure out what works best for me to really disassociate with work and then even just my life, right? Like I just recently got engaged. Like we have a wedding we're planning. Thank you. And I feel like I can't even put my full attention into that because I'm so worried about other people all the time, which I feel like is a blessing and a curse.
Yeah, I was going to say, is there anything about your work that has helped you in your personal life deal with things that are outside of your control? Because I've always struggled with that. So I'm curious if there's anything that you've learned from your job that has carried over into your personal life. Because like I said, you're going home some days and you're like, God, like I can't do anything else, but like that kid might not be okay at home. Right. I don't know what the phone call I'm going to get is tomorrow. Yeah. And then when you relate that to your personal life, like, yeah, you don't have control over how your fiance acts or how your family acts or how the person at the grocery store, whoever it is, treats you. How, like, how do you kind of use those tools? I think I've learned that, you know, I always say, and I say it to Scott, my fiance, a lot. It's like... Shout out to Scott. Yeah. Love you, honey. Is that, you know, everybody's like, you know, you're so great with kids. And they're like, you could be so mean to adults. And I've learned, and I always say, I'm like, well, kids, kids don't know better. I'm glad you laugh. Well, because it's the truth. I've seen her be mean to adults. Yes. And I think my thing is, like, I was like, well, kids should know better. And I was like, adults, you know, should know better. But as I've come, and I think it's just a part of my patience, is that, like, I'm like, you're a 45-year-old man. Like, why? Like, but then I had to take a step back, and it's like, yes, this is a 45-year-old man who might have the social emotional capacity of a 15-year-old. Yeah, something happened. Yes, like you stagnated at that point, and I think even now it's still hard for me. But I'm trying to learn that like common sense is not so common, and that you need to just try to understand where that person is coming from, and then if you do know them, why they said that, understand like what their background was or what made them say that. Give them the benefit of the doubt. And at least try to, even if it makes zero sense. Like, I mean, I truly give people the benefit of the doubt, and I always say it takes a lot for me to not like somebody, like a lot. Like I can come off like very aggressive and things like that, but I will talk to anybody and I will hang out with whoever. But it takes a lot for me to be like, I do not like that person. Like, they are not a good person, and I hate them. Like, it takes a lot for me to say the word hate. Like, I hate something or I hate somebody. I think that's good, because you were just flinging around the word hate at work. Like, carry over to the kids. Yeah, exactly. And, like, I joke around. I'm like, oh my God, these kids are driving me nuts. Yeah. But they are kids for a reason, right? They need guidance. They can't just walk into the world, go apply for a job at, McDonald's and say, I'm ready to learn. It's not the way the world works. Yeah. So, unfortunately, I wish we all just came out knowing what to do. Yeah. Or a handbook to life. Yeah. Absolutely. If someone had one of those, that'd be great. Yeah, exactly. But, I mean, it seems like you're at least contributing in small ways to these kids' lives. And I think that's what I try to remember. So you try to, like, focus on, like, the good part of it. Yeah, and like, we have kids that I've worked with in the past who were terrors, right? They came in cursing, flipping middle fingers, trashing classrooms, eloping, throwing rocks at my head, right? Running towards... Yeah, yes. I keep thinking of that. Like the 6-year-old is going to Hawaii to Vegas to get married. Right, exactly. And so funny. I'm like, what is going on? Yeah. But I think getting to your, back to your point, JP, I think just the change in dynamics, I think is 1 is COVID, 2, social interaction, and I think 3 is parenting. And maybe number 4, I think, is really just us accepting that kids can also have mental illness. And it's okay. Yeah. And there also is just now the spectrum now, right, of
autism, which now also has the other spectrum of other diagnoses. So we're seeing more people are like, well, why are all these people now being, diagnosed more? And it's like, that is true and it's not. Because studies were only done on boys. That's why boys are more diagnosed with autism than girls, because girls have higher masking abilities. Masking meaning that they are able to go in a social situation and say, okay, this is how they're acting, this is how I'm going to act. And you'll never catch it.
Interesting.
And, people with autism existed for a very long time. First it was called Asperger's, or they were put in a mental institution, right?
Yeah.
You have one right over here that used to be a mental institution. It's now going to be a spa. Stupid.
I have two stepbrothers who are both like developmentally. One of them has like severe autism, and one of them is on the spectrum.
Yeah.
He's got physical disability, and even from when I first got to know them to now, I've noticed the difference in the way that like, especially like if you go out to like a restaurant or like just in public, whatever, like we're at a movie theater, the way that I think people are growing to be more understanding of it.
Yes.
And it's like, it's kind of like breaking that thing of that, like, no, this isn't something to be made fun of.
No.
And it's something that should be like treated with care, because like they're people too. They make jokes.
Yeah.
They have feelings. They cry. They get angry.
Yes.
It's just like the wiring of it is different than what you see on a regular day.
Well, right, exactly. And I think now in schools, like, we're really trying to promote diversity. We're trying to promote that, just because they're doing something different doesn't mean that it's wrong.
Yeah.
And
shout out to Elon Musk for making it cool,
Yeah. Unbelievable. That guy. Would love a free Tesla if you're sponsoring.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll take that.
But, like, it's just, I think we need to, like, it needs to be, like, modernized and just, out there. Like, and I think people get upset when it's, like, displayed, like, on TV and in commercials. They're like, it's in my face. And it's like, no, it's still out there. We're trying to be inclusive and say that, like, this population is not less than. They're just different. And honestly, the special education population is my favorite population to work with.
That makes me so happy to hear that.
They are so funny and they have my heart. And sometimes the things they say to me, I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, where did you get that from? Yeah. But it's because when you work with them, especially like early intervention, it just changes like how they operate, how they learn, how they interact in society.
I think she's on the spectrum a little bit.
It's okay. It's okay. I know. It's okay. That's why you came to me, because she lets me do stuff, though.
What are some things that you would like to see change more in, like, that social worker setting? Like,
this is your time.
This is go vent, girl.
This is your time. We can accidentally send this to your supervisor.
Yeah, right. I'm sending it to my supervisor. I know. So I've been to a lot of social work forums, if you will. They're actually held in Albany. Every year they do a social work conference. And what they do is there's a new theme.
You guys dress
every
up
year.
as like different diseases.
No, I just go in regular clothes.
No way.
Imagine.
I'm sorry.
Imagine. Be like,
she's like, I'm excited.
Also, did I really want to do that for Halloween this year?
Yeah.
We didn't do it. But when you go, there is
season 3 of Depression.
What? Yeah. So you're this attachment. You're passive attachment.
Yeah. Come on, guys. Let's be the attachment styles.
Right.
Like, come on.
No.
Come on.
Why not?
I call avoid.
Right. Nobody talks to me. But I think what it is like when you go there, you're trying to advocate for your position, right? And one of the things that first thing they tell you when you go to school for social work is you're in it for the outcome, not the income. And I like understood it when I was in school, and I was like, okay, like, yeah, like, they don't make a lot of money. But being in the field now, I'm like, this one sucks. Like, and I'm lucky enough to be on a teacher scale, so it's different for me, but other people who are in, like, who are working for CPS or working at other organizations or working for nonprofits, they're not viewed as like an essential part of the team. So they don't get compensated for that as. And I think also, not just, obviously it's not just the money, right? But it's also nice to have. But I think it's also just having more mental health resources. Like, everyone keeps talking about it, right? It's even this past mental health month, the theme was getting mental health in the workplace. And I think especially now, like, there's not a lot for the younger kids. We have so many kids who are on wait lists. And those counties or those areas where it's almost like a mental health desert, right? Mm-hmm. There are no therapists, there are no mental health counselors, there are no anything. And then we have parents who are like, well, what do? I don't want to do virtual, especially for young kids. It's not great. You need to have that, interaction with them.
I started on virtual therapy. That's where I started.
Yeah.
I did therapy virtually for almost 3 years before I
Yeah. And for
and
for some people it works great. But I always tell parents, I said, especially with younger kids, especially if you're, sometimes we have the boys who have like ADHD, right? And they just need a little guidance. Mm-hmm. I was
I feel like you're talking directly to me right now.
Virtual will not work for them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was like, they need to be in a room where they can be in the presence of another person.
Yeah.
Because in front of the computer, even during COVID when the kids were on the computer, they were everywhere. It was madness.
I noticed a huge change in kind of like what I was able to talk about and let go of when I went in person. Yeah. And I think that no matter what happens, like, it was still good for me to go virtually. Right. But there is a difference there for sure.
Yeah. And I think that's, with anybody. But I think, besides the income and then also the, mental health thing, I think for just the mental health, I think, community in general, I think it's getting getting rid of the word stigma. Right? Like, why? Because someone needs extra help, that makes them less than. Like, no, people need extra help because, one, they lack the resources, or two, mentally, physically, there's something in their mind that is just not correct or that needs to be addressed and helped.
In a safe way.
Exactly. And I think,
that makes them feel like they're not.
But when we were older, it was like, get over it. Like, you're fine.
Yeah, to wait till you're 30 and then start a podcast.
Yeah. Right. Right. And now we're trying to figure it out. Yeah. When this could have probably, not been prevented, but at least you would have the tools to now say at 30, like, okay, like, I know what I need to do. And we would have had those healthier coping skills sooner.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But because we didn't have that. So.
Yeah, so, I mean, a big reason as to why me and him both started this is because of the stigma around men's mental health specifically.
Yeah.
As, like, we're getting older and we're trying to figure out more ways to, like, get involved and help. What do you believe is, like, the most important thing that you can do for, like, young men specifically to make them, I don't know, I keep going back to it, but I feel like just, like, that it's okay to have feelings and maybe to have, like, what's considered to be, like, feminine energy,
right?
Whatever that is, because, like, as I've gotten older, as I've gotten older, and as, like, especially since we started doing this, I've realized that, like, that's so important, and that if I can't connect to that, how am I going to be me?
But I think when it comes to boys, young men, one, I think it's having a positive male role model. I don't care who it is. It doesn't have to be your father. It doesn't have to be somebody that's in your immediate family.
Master Joe Fry at Fry's Karate in New Windsor.
Yeah.
Shout out.
Great male role model.
Yes, but I think and there literally is a study that if there is one positive role model in a child's life, they are automatically destined to do better with whatever they do in their future. Whether it just be more successful or be more independent. Having, especially for boys, having that positive male role model to say, you can cry. Is that doing anything to you? Is it making you lose your muscles? Is it making you, you know what I mean? No, it's water coming from your eyes that everybody does, and it's a release. It's a positive release. You're not going and punching the wall. You're not going outside and trying to start a fight. No, you're trying to help yourself feel better, and that's okay. Trying to make yourself better as a person every day is what you should be doing. You should be wanting to be better than the person you were yesterday, the week before, a year before, 3 years before. And I think for boys, when they see, like you said, they see John Cena, right? They see Vin Diesel.
John Cena is actually a great guy.
Yes.
I feel like he's my guy.
But I mean, like physically, like, and The Rock. Like, all these huge men that are like, me, man, I'm tough, right? Yeah. But you can still be tough, right? but also still be sincere and sensitive, right? And be in tune with your emotions. And I think, like you guys said, like, right, like even just recently, I feel like you guys have said, like, you've gotten more in touch with that part, and you're like, it's okay to admit.
I wouldn't know what to do if I didn't.
Yeah, it's like it's okay to admit that, like, I'm fucked up and I don't know what to do right now. But I think if it's not talked about, if it's not normalized, then it's considered less than, or you are not a man because you're told you don't cry, you don't get sad. You're supposed to take care of everybody. You're the one who's supposed to have everything on your shoulders and not seek help. But when you look back at those men who do that, they are struggling.
Yeah. Wow. No, you're saying a lot of things that, like, not only, like, I think what we would have liked to hear as young boys, but, like, as, you know, just what men need to hear in general.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking about, like, what it would have meant to have, like, somebody, because I also feel like maybe when I was a kid, there was people who were trying to do that and were trying to tell me that, and, like, the overwhelming weight of what society was telling you just couldn't get through to that.
Right.
So then, like, how do you kind of, like, fight back against that and tell them, like I said, if you're going home and your dad is being like, you can't wear a pink shirt, that's fucking gay.
Yeah.
Like, how do you kind of...
Yeah.
But that kid thinks his dad is, like, the...
Right.
So how do you, in a gentle way, kind of explain that your parents aren't always right about everything?
Yeah.
And, like, the movie stars or the people who, like, kids look up to, even though maybe they shouldn't, like...
Right.
How do you approach telling a kid that, like, no, maybe, like...
Maybe that shouldn't be what they should have did.
maybe the video you saw. Maybe it's not cool to, like, act like a toxic man.
Yeah. So I think
basically is the.
I think I'm just going to answer you in the way that, like, I would answer the kid. Yes. So that's like. So I'm going to pretend like I'm talking to one of the kids, right? So let's say I'll just use your example, JP. Yeah. So, like, you know, a kid comes in, he's crying, and maybe it was like Spirit Week, and we asked, you know, the fourth grade, everyone in fourth grade, to wear the color pink. And kid came in and he's crying, got off the bus, and, you know, I grab him and I'm like, what's going on, bud? And he tells me that. And so what I always do is, if a child is in crisis or showing any sort of, like, larger emotions, I will bring them to an enclosed space. And I always say, I said, your business is your business. You don't want anybody else listening. You deserve privacy. So I'll bring them to either my space or another place, because, again, kids are nosy. They want to know what's going on. They're listening. What's happening? What's wrong? Nothing. Mind your business. Go to class. Yeah. So I bring them to somewhere private, and I would just say to him, well, what, do you like the shirt you're wearing? Yeah? Okay. Why does daddy not like that? Well, he thinks it's gay. Do you know what gay means? Well, and I'm like, first of all, being gay is not a bad thing. When you use it in a derogatory term, it can be bad.
Which, by the way, like, I heard a guy at the gym, an older guy, say this to a younger kid at the gym. Yeah. Like, a week ago. Yeah.
Being gay is not bad.
Like, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I could. Yeah. But I also was just like, why, like...
It's almost like you're, like, he was stunned. Like,
yeah, he was like explaining to a kid that, like, that's what you should do to the kid who comes in acting like that. Yeah. Not like he was saying it to the kid. Right. But I was just still like, imagine, like, that, if that guy has kids. Yeah. Or what, like, he's saying to them. Yeah, exactly. Like, what? Right. And then, like, the work that would go into, as a teenager, even as you grow into being an adult, to trying to reshape your view around something so simple. When like, that's just the beginning of it. That is literally the tip of the iceberg. Imagine if it was crying or it was something like that.
Right, exactly. And I think, so when I talk to them, you know, I'll say, well, like, do you think you're, you know, are you upsetting your parents? Do you think you're, you know, hurting their feelings? Like, why are you crying? Like, what is making you feel bad about what you're wearing? And then anytime I have a conversation with a kid, I usually call home anyway. So I would be having a conversation with the dad regardless. Yeah, and it's a tough one. It is. And you know what? All I can say is what we as the school tell our kids, which is, we say that everyone belongs here. Everyone has a place here. And you need to be kind, and if you feel like someone's being unkind to you, you need to tell an adult right away. And sometimes that adult is your parents. And what do the kids do when they need to tell on their own parent?
Yeah, that's a really tough situation. Yeah.
And then it's like, they're like, well, I don't want to get mommy in trouble. I don't want to get daddy in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, you're not getting them in trouble. I'm going to call them. I'm not going to call them because they're in trouble. That's not what I do. I'm calling them because maybe they just need extra help explaining to how this works or what this means or what they meant by when they said that.
I think clarification is so important with
Yes.
young kids especially.
Yes, and I think it's all about talking. Like, you don't have to, like, you know, I think also, like, especially, like, with death, suicide, right? Things that we think that are too big or broad of a scope for children to understand. If you word it to them in a way that they will understand it a lot more than you think they will.
Mm.
They're just very smart.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of scary how smart they can be. Especially with, like, technology and things like that, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes, you know, I'm talking to kindergartners or first graders. I'm like, where did you learn this vocabulary? It's like talking to an adult. I was like, and I'm supposed to be the adult in this room?
Yeah.
I was like, I don't even know what that word means.
Yeah. Do you ever have moments where you're, like, dealing with kids like that and you can kind of see them starting to break patterns?
Yes. And I think kind of what you were going back to when you said, like, what's your, like, most rewarding? I think that's one of them.
Yeah.
Is saying, like, I helped shape that behavior.
Yeah.
Like, when they utilize a coping skill that, like, I taught them, or when they even are just being able to adjust from a situation that might be uncomfortable for them first, and now they're able to navigate that situation either with, you know, support or independent. It's like, okay, something is working, something is clicking, and something is working for them that wasn't previously. And that truly is why, you know, they would have mandated counseling, right? Is we want to change that pattern of the social behavior so it's not affecting them academically anymore. And that's why kids have mandated counseling on their IEPs or an individualized education plan, is because
you gotta explain that.
Yep, I realized that. Yep, IEPs, because they don't know the difference, and the whole point of that is to have all these services for them so that they can eventually, hopefully, graduate from all those services, right? And then they can hope maybe in the future mainstream or move to an inclusion class, which is half special education, half general education. So.
Are there any, like, obviously, like, we know you're not going to keep names out of it.
No, that's okay.
Like that. Are there any, like, specific stories where you've kind of interacted with the same kid over the years and have like noticed the change in them? Yeah.
So I have like 2 or 3 that are coming specifically to my mind, but there's one in particular. They are not in our school anymore. They moved away, I think, the year before. But I had worked with this child and their family directly for almost 3 years. And this child was on the spectrum, more needed support with social emotional, like regulation, coping skills, things like that. Super smart. Could literally tell you how to get to Albany from here, tell you exactly what routes to take, how long it would take, and the mile marker. Like, it was crazy.
Should've taken them with you, bro.
Like, this kid loved maps, loved roads, loved road signs. But sad backstory, right? So both parents addicted to drugs. Dad was in jail. Mom passed away. Grew up knowing grandma as mom. That was mom. Did not know the difference. And grew up knowing his aunt, who was the mom's sister, as his sister. Didn't know the difference.
Yeah.
Long story short, grandma ended up having cirrhosis of the liver and passed away. There was no other adult in that home that could take that child. And he ended up being placed into foster care with a different family. But just that time frame, going to the house constantly, talking to the grandma, and then going to the house again, the grandma not being there. It was like a death, like, to me. Like, I was mourning the mother's passing as well, because 1, this child is young, he was only 8, and 2, he's on the spectrum. So how is he going to understand? What is he going to understand? What are his questions going to be? And then, you know, with his teachers and other supports, we went with him for the, you know, an adoption hearing at court. Like, I supported. We still get invited to, like, his birthday parties, even though he doesn't go to our school anymore. Like, the, now the father that he's with adopted him.
Wow, that's amazing.
Best thing that could have ever happened. And he's happy and he's doing well. But when I think about it, like, that kid went through a lot. at a young age.
It could have gone the other way.
And he could have been lost in the system, right?
Yeah.
Had someone not opened their doors to say, I'm going to give you a chance, you deserve a home. But then there's another child that I'm thinking of who did have a good home, right? All good things, they had loving parents, house to live in, all the resources, but mentally there was something very wrong. And this was when I started working with them. They were a first grader saying that they did not want to be here anymore and that they were physically trying to harm themselves. And I worked with that family for it would have been the 4th year, but the child moved away. And they were always on my caseload. I always had the family. And there'd be times when, the parents would call and say, crying, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And again, you have to be that solid and say, we're going to figure this out. This is not forever. It's just right now. I promise you, this is not forever. But obviously in that moment, it feels like forever. Especially when that's the same parent that you're talking to that I just had to take your child to get evaluated at 6 years old because they're saying, they're hearing things. They want to hurt people. They're hurting themselves. And to look at a tiny 6-year-old child and think they have all that going on is sad and it's scary. Because you don't think that that little body can have so much turmoil. But again, you don't know what someone's going through. And as they get into an adult, what that younger self was like to where they became this adult that they are today. But you never know. But that's the thing. Like I always tell parents, I was like, if you don't nip this in the butt now, this is going to be a problem to get over. A problem, like legality-wise problem. Not just like, for you to parent, but like in society, this is going to be an issue.
Sometimes it's okay to sit in silence,
Yeah. Listen, I enjoy the silence, especially when it's 800 kids running through the hallway.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's fine with me.
Yeah.
I love a good time.
Well, we don't want to take up all of your day. You probably had a long day at work. Is there anything that you'd like to ask us? Well,
yeah. So, I mean, when you guys are doing this podcast, like I know your goal is to like really promote mental health, right? And to like try to normalize that. But what's like your end goal for this podcast? Like what is your, like, let's say if you had one goal that like, if money wasn't an option, like knowing people like wasn't, like a deciding factor, like what would you guys like want this to become?
That's a great question. I'd say.
So I know you're supposed to be interviewing me, but I just generally want to know.
I gave you the floor. I think in the beginning, him and I always talked about the fact that if somebody watched one episode or one clip or one thing and it just kind of like made them think a little differently and helped them not feel alone, that we had done our job and we could just stop doing the podcast. So I would say that like long term going forward, like is just to kind of be able to do that on a grand scale.
Yeah.
And to be able to, we've talked about it a lot today, is that like being able to make a difference specifically in like young men's lives.
Yeah.
And be able to, like, I know that I didn't think when I was a kid that there were people who were 32 years old like me and him.
No.
Who were trying to be better, who were trying to be good friends, husbands, fathers, sons.
Well, because we consider them adults, right? Like,
Yeah.
I know we're supposed to be adults.
Yeah.
But the fact that sometimes people come to me and they're like, oh, and they ask me adult questions, I'm like, I don't fucking know.
Yeah. So like, if I had to put it into like one sentence, like I'd say that, in a way, it's just like trying to reframe what it means to like be cool or be a man, and that like talking about your feelings or being a good friend or showing up for your partner or your mom or your dad, or maybe it's a young kid whose life that you're involved in some type of proxy way. That's what I would say.
Yeah, that's awesome, and I think that's great. Like you said, I think just getting even to one person, like that is like your why, right? Like that's my why. Like I just want to help, even if it's one person who's listening, and or even if they took like a few people took a little bit of something from each of your videos, right? And it's like that makes sense.
Yeah, you gotta go though, bro.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Yeah, I'm sure it's very similar.
It piggybacks off of what you
Yeah.
said. I think as this has gone on a little bit longer, I've also realized that we're not just doing this for other people. Like, this is work that we're doing on ourselves, having these conversations.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
like, my end goal would be to continue to, through these conversations, to bring on people like yourself and other people that have experience in different fields and walks of life. This way you can have those conversations, because I say it every time we have a guest on, and like, it's definitely affected me and you just personally.
Yeah, I mean, I'll never be the same after this conversation. Yeah.
Every time I
Cool
have a
ADHD
conversation every time I have a conversation with somebody, you learn something new, you learn something about that person, and like, it's just more information that goes out there that's not brain rot on the internet to help people. Because if we can continue to help ourselves, continue to have great conversations with guests of all fields, that's just more information and knowledge that we can provide. And I think that's the big end goal for me personally now, like, and with this, is just to be able to drop as much knowledge and insight as we can, because I know growing up like he did, I would have loved to have all of this.
Yeah.
To be able to see this and understand this and listen to people it was until I was 29 that I listened to two people on a podcast that were friends have serious conversations, and I was like, shit, I wonder what that would be like.
Right, like, you can do that, like, that's okay.
Yeah.
And
Like, people do that.
my life has changed so drastically in the positive since we've started this. So, like, yeah, that would be mine.
Yeah.
I mean, and honestly, just like piggyback off what you guys said, like, I was talking about this to my coworkers today. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna be on this podcast, like, with my friends, whatever. And I was just looking at, like, you know, I remember, like, even just when I was still working at the bar and you were coming, you're like, you have to download all my stuff. And I was like, okay.
Oh, yeah.
But, like, even looking at it now, like, I was looking at the YouTube, and, like, you guys are really getting up there with your views. And, like, I think it was the last one you guys posted. I think it has, like, 500 views in, like, a month. Like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Like, from where you guys can, like, started, right, to now, like, I think it's just really interesting to watch, like, even this brand new beautiful light. Like, you guys are,
The light just made his.
but like this is becoming. I
might just leave it up in the apartment.
As you should. It's great lighting, selfie light.
Right?
But I think you guys are really, I think, like, putting into the universe what you want to come out of this, and it truly is showing. Just like, you know, like I said, just like the stands now, like, you guys have a spot where you guys do it, and you guys put it together, and it looks so cool at the end. But that takes time.
Thank you. I really
right?
appreciate it.
Of course.
No, it does. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah, we always said that, like, you know, a lot of work goes into this behind the scenes. And I think that, I think you made a good point that, like, I don't think we'd be able to keep going on this if we didn't also kind of make it about ourselves in a little bit of a way.
Yeah.
And a lot of what this podcast has taught me, it's what he's taught me in a lot of ways, is that, like, you can't show up for the people in your life without working on yourself, and that it's not selfish to take time for yourself, or to sit in silence, or to say, like, hey, this is a little overwhelming for me, or I have to step away from this, or whatever it might be. That you can't be like that light in the world, at least even if it's a little bit of a flickering candle, without kind of igniting it in yourself, because then you're going to have a hard time with understanding where you're coming from, or whoever comes on here, or even understanding the person who writes something really negative on our comments or on our YouTube, you know?
And I think that's, like, kind of what you were saying, right? Like, had you guys have heard that when you were younger, you would have had probably those positive coping skills. Now say, like, nope, I just need a break. And that's why I tell the kids, you're allowed to tell somebody, I don't like that, please stop. I don't want to talk to you right now. Like, you're not being mean, you're not being a good friend, you're setting your boundaries so that you can then continue to still be a good friend to that person, or continue to be a good daughter, continue to be, you know, whatever. But you have to have, like you were saying, Steve, too, like, have that grounding, check in with yourself. Like, am I good? Like, people always joke, like, bro, are you good? No, like, am I good? Like, I need to check in with myself. Am I good?
And being able to, like, we always talk about being able to be honest with yourself about where you're at. And where can I push myself today? Where can I kind of pull back? And
and not punishing yourself about it.
And just, like, being able to, I feel like some of it is just, like, being able to, like, look at yourself objectively, and that it's not all about you, but some of it's about you. Because you live in this body, and the only way that you can show up is through yourself. I can't just wake up one day and show up as you.
And you literally only get one shot.
And,
So.
and also, I don't think I could do the 800 kids thing.
I can barely do the 800 kid things, but I made it. I'm here.
You did, yeah.
But thank you
The fact that
guys.
you came here on a work day was incredible.
I went home and I was like, I can't change. I was like, because I would have put on like my pajamas right now, and I would probably be in bed by now.
You just
But
said it, yeah.
thank you guys so much. Seriously, like this was also kind of like therapeutic for me too, just to kind of like talk about like works a lot, but I love what I do.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we have one more question for you
Of
we ask all our guests at the end. A big book for us was a book called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And in the book he talks about building kind of a council for yourself. And those can be real people, fictional characters, really anything. Do you have like a few people who, when you're looking to make a tough decision, or maybe you just like you don't know what to do next, and maybe it's at work, maybe it's in your personal life, like that you would say like that this person would inspire you to how you approach things?
So I'll start with first like a personal, like in my personal life, and again like going back to like this wouldn't be cool, right? Like if I said this 20 years ago, but I always go to my mom. Like I think she knows every answer in the world, even though I know that's not true. But like I still call her. I'm like, what do I put on like on my my tax form? Like, am I 0 or am I 1? Like, what do I do?
Yeah.
And but with like those really tough decisions, like when we were looking to buy our condo, or like when we were starting to plan our wedding, I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, or when I was applying for jobs and I know she's in the field, I was like, what do I do? Like, I don't even know how to begin to approach this. But I think that's who someone I go to if I need someone to be very honest and to point me in the right direction. But I think if I need someone who just wants to listen to me and that our relationship has truly grown, I think that we've become more open as we gotten older, is my sister. You guys know her. Emily, love you. So we're 4 years apart, and I think just as like when we were younger, it was very much like, you're a pain in my ass, get out of my room, stop stealing my clothes.
That's what it is for most people.
Yeah, but as we got older, like you realize like, no, like that's an actual adult, like that's actually kind of cool that I can have someone who's close to my age that I know I can literally say anything to, and yes, she might laugh, and like yes, she might say something, but I know she's still gonna love me, obviously, regardless at the end of the day. But there's not a lot of people that I feel like I can say that to be like, regardless of what I tell them, regardless of what I do, like we listen, we don't judge. Like I feel like there's only a few people that I can say that. Because you have to also be, very intentional with who you're sharing that stuff with, right?
Yeah, of course.
Not everybody gets to have that piece of you. So when you do share that, I think it's important that those people then take, what you're saying into consideration, and they truly acknowledge and appreciate you as a person and the contributions that you have in their life. I love you guys. I love you. I love you guys.
Funny looking dog.
How dare you? She's an angel baby.
Every time.
I love
She's
her.
a baby. Is there anybody else you would put on your council?
I'm trying to think
I know.
of somebody that
we like the idea of that it's like on the spot, because usually I think that leads to the best answers.
I think I'm really trying to think of someone that is like not in my personal life, but something. You know what I do? I have a favorite author. His name is Frederick Backman. He is a Swedish author.
We are always looking for new books, so.
And he has a few books that I really loved. One of them is a trilogy. It's called oh my god. It's called oh my god, why am I forgetting it now? Something Bear. I have to look it up. I'll tell you guys.
Yeah.
We'll pop it up on the thing.
Yeah.
We'll fix it.
We'll fix it.
We'll literally
We'll
fix
fix
it in
it.
post.
We'll fix it.
Yeah,
Oh, Beartown. That's what it's called. Sorry, Beartown. That's what it's called. Beartown.
Nice. You got
So I got it. So
give me a
it's.
second. Always comes.
Are you kidding me? But it's a trilogy, and basically it's about this town who's like obsessed with hockey, but then a rape happens in the small town, then like a murder, and it's basically how the town, it's super small, and like how they navigate that, but also how they navigate the hockey team with those kids being on the team.
Yeah.
But he also recently came out with a book called Anxious People.
Okay.
And it's really good. It's probably one of my favorite books from him. And it's one of those books that there's points of view from all different people, but then it all comes together.
Okay, nice.
And I read that, and it actually had, I don't know if it's still on it, but they had actually a series on Netflix that they adapted from that book, and it was like a small series of like 6 episodes. But his books are really, I feel like him and Mitch Albom, who wrote
yeah, that name I know. Yeah.
Yes,
Tuesdays with Maury.
Yeah.
that is my absolute favorite book of all time.
Tuesdays with Maury.
We read that in
the
10th grade.
the Ferris wheel with the Ferris wheel on the cover of that.
Yes.
So the 7 people you meet in heaven.
Did you read the next people you meet in heaven?
No, I haven't.
So it's the second one to that book.
I don't know.
have it. I'll let you borrow
that
it.
guy's name since we
Miss
were
Fontana.
I love that. I still, but that book I have is a soft cover. It's like all beat up now, but I have like tabs of my favorite quotes from that book.
That is a book that is always in like the library mindset. Their
Yes.
Instagram, they post Tuesdays with Maury all the time. It's like a book that they
It's so
recommend
good.
that everybody reads.
And
Yeah.
did you see the movie? It was also really good.
No, I'm not. Oh no, yeah,
Yeah,
I
we
have
watched
this.
it.
It's with John Boyd,
Yes,
right?
yes,
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
yes, it's really good. But I feel like those two authors are very similar in the way they tell stories. And sometimes, I don't know, like sometimes I really just want to get lost in like a stupid book, right? Like
Well, sometimes that's what connects with people is that it's not like being able to give people true and real life lessons
Yes.
through storytelling versus like sometimes like self-improvement books connect with people more, but
Yeah.
other times like being able to put it into a story and be like, oh, like this is how it affected this person, and
Yes.
then you can kind of
Yeah.
have your own interpretation of it
And I
versus
think
it
that's
being
why
this
I like
language
them.
that's like very
Yes, it's almost like very black and
academic.
white. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
very black and
academic.
white. But he's also the guy, the movie that just came out recently with Tom Hanks or a few years ago, a man named
Oh, Otto. Yeah.
Otto.
Mhm.
That's the book, A Man
I heard a
Called
lot of people
Ove,
cried.
from Frederick Backman.
Wow, okay, there you go. Yeah.
And that's probably the thing. That's the first book I read from him, from Frederick Backman, is A Man Called Ove, and I loved it. And it really just like opens up your eyes to like, what could be happening in other people's lives, and like you're like, why is this old man so fucking
Have you ever
grumpy?
seen A Beautiful Boy?
Stop, it made me cry.
So
Why
good.
would you do
I
that?
brought it up with the Timmy.
Why would you do that?
Yeah, that movie
Do
is-
you want me to cry right now?
We're on the topic of it, so
Yeah.
But
That's a Timmy
also, really good story.
yeah.
But sometimes, like, people don't like watching because it brings up those emotions. They don't like reading because it brings
I
up
lo-
those
now,
emotions,
like
right?
I used to hide from that, but I look for that kind of
Yes,
stuff now.
same.
Yeah.
Like 10 years ago, I would find something like that like boring
Yeah,
or
yes,
lame.
same.
or whatever,
Mhm.
and now I kind of like look for stuff that is like,
Oh, we're gonna watch that when I go home.
As you should.
yeah,
As you
yeah,
should.
that like makes it real,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I can like somehow just put it into that language or that medium that is like, damn, this connects with me.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. And more on like a personal level, I feel like, because when someone's just like
Yeah.
telling you like the theory of it, you're like, okay.
Yeah, even just like the other day, because we're on the topic of
Yeah.
Timothy Chalamet, like, let's see, like when 7 years ago when Call Me by Your Name came out,
Yeah.
I never ever would have watched that because I'd be like, that's gay.
Yeah.
And then like I watched it the other night and I was like, it doesn't matter that they're gay, like it's, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't mean, and it doesn't have to be that.
Right.
And like I noticed in myself being able to be like, oh shit.
Like I'm gonna
that's-
appreciate it for what it is, like the cinematic,
yeah, and
the
this
story.
Is, and this is real, and it doesn't. Yeah, exactly. And that like you didn't watch the movie and then be like, oh shit, I'm gay.
Now I'm gay.
Like yeah, exactly. But like you realize that like when you were young or when
That's what people
even
say.
not when you were young, when you were fucking like clouded in your head and you had these preconceived notions about what it meant to like seek that out.
Mhm.
That you can turn it around and be like, no, like I get to define what being a man is. I
Right.
get to define like the spectrum of
Mhm.
what I like and what I don't like,
Yeah.
and
what
that,
it
like,
means to me.
and that like anybody who would be like, you like that movie, that's gay. That's not
Yeah.
somebody who I'd want to be around anyway.
Right,
Or it's
exactly.
an opportunity to be like, let me take this as a way to explain
Right.
to you that whatever.
Yes.
That like.
Yeah.
No, like it doesn't have. You don't have to define it within the like square box of like what you grew up in or what.
Right. Just
somebody
because
else
somebody
does.
has their nail painted
what-
does not mean that you're now gay because they gave you a coffee.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
no, that's not how that
exactly.
works.
Mhm.
But if
No,
you guys want to borrow any of those Frederick Backman books, or
Yeah.
I have the Tuesdays
Yeah.
of Maury and the next People
Okay.
You Meet Heaven, I have
No,
them.
yeah. I've been meaning to watch that A Man Called Otto.
It's good.
Yeah.
It's really. I mean, it's definitely it's an emotional movie, but
That's fine.
it's really good.
That's fine.
Are you Bo? Why are you sitting like
Well, this has been great.
Yeah.
Thank
you so much
you.
for taking time out of your day to come on. And
No,
join
thank
us.
you for having me. I mean, I know you guys have your own lives and it's been a long day, so thank you for just.
But I would say that probably neither one of us had as long a day as you had, regardless of the fact that you had a real estate exam today.
Yeah, which still counts.
My day was not that long.
The stress counts, but
Exactly. No, but yeah, doing this with people like you is exactly why we do it, and we hope that whoever listens or watches this, we hope you gain something from it.
yeah,
Yeah.
even if it's
Social workers are people too.
Yeah. Is there?
try our best. We're not miracle workers, okay?
Yeah.
That's only Jesus.
Is there any other message or thing that you'd like to promote before we sign off?
Yeah,
You can look into right here too. Yeah.
I think just going forward, I think with anything you do it with purpose and know that what you're doing and the amount of effort that you're giving at this moment is okay.
Sick. Good sign off.
Thank
Great
you.
sign. You gotta walk off now, though.
Okay,
You gotta walk off.
Get off me.
Who thought we'd be here? Oh, you gotta say that. You gotta look right at the
Are you
camera and say
serious?
that.
I wasn't ready. Oh my God.
You could just hold that mic right up.
Yeah.
Who thought we'd be here?
There we
Look
go.
at us.
Yeah, that's a wrap.
All right.